yeah. Sevens are also a very mental type. So the gluttony is not so much a kind of physical drive toward or a physical greed. It's more a mental kind of greed. It's a wanting of interesting ideas and titillation and interesting thoughts and making connections and all of that.
It's very much about stimulation, isn't
It's
it?
very much about stimulation.
Yeah, and for someone that loves stimulation, to say, well, they need to be more sober
Yeah.
in all aspects
Yes. Yes.
is tough. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, because you're basically saying that what's causing a lot of your problems is going with that drive for stimulation.
Yeah.
That it, in and of itself, is making you suffer. It's keeping you in a state of inner unrest,
Yes.
basically.
Yes.
Yeah. So, point 8
Point eight.
lust. And it sounds very close to gluttony, except that here, lust is being at the mercy of our physical passions, our physical drives, whether it's our sexual drives or our lust for life, our desire to just kind of devour things. So it's, again, the attitude is of taking in what's going to satisfy from outside, but it's a matter here of completely devouring it. Just sort of grabbing life and as much of life as possible and just eating it up.
Which, on the face of it, sounds an intelligent thing to do when you're younger, just to get the best you can out of life. It sounds very passionate, and it just sounds as though you want the best of what's available. And I want to say, what's wrong with that?
Well, there's nothing wrong with that. It's just that when our drive, our passion to take in becomes something that's a fixation, it's the only way we can operate, such that we're constantly trying to gratify our physical needs, then we become slaves of our bodies.
So it becomes an automatic program somehow.
Yes, yes, and for eights it very much is. It's like being a slave to your appetites and not having any freedom from them.
Yeah.
And the virtue innocence tells us that the more that we become slaves of our appetites, the coarser our consciousness becomes. And we can see that in people who are alcoholics, for instance, or who are slaves to particular types of addictive behavior, which is not to say that eights are addicts or alcoholics or anything like that. But that when they are, what's happening is this kind of addictive, passionate quality in which one can't say no to one's drives. And that it has the natural tendency to coarsen one's soul, one's consciousness. There's a sense of density and of grossness that gradually starts to take over. From a spiritual perspective, the virtue here is telling us that we lose our innocence, we lose the openness and the transparency of our consciousness the more that we're driven by our physical, biological drives.
Thank you. We have a few minutes left, so
Okay.
we can still very much talk about this whole relationship between the passions and the virtues.
Yeah.
And again, in the introduction to your book, you say, and it's very obvious now, you've talked about it, that you need to really understand the passions before you can access the virtues. So it is very much going within, I guess,
Yes.
understanding the way you are, and I guess it helps to understand the way other people are too, and then that opens up doorways, doesn't it?
Yes. Yes. Yeah. Sometimes people work with the virtues as trying to take on certain characteristics. It's not the approach that I take to them. I think that, as you say, there's something that evolves naturally. The more that we start unwinding and understanding the way that our structure works.
So you mentioned earlier the diamond approach,
Yeah.
which is I think you have seminars, don't you? You retreats you run in Wales and the UK.
Right.
And you work partly with the Enneagram on those retreats?
Yes, it's kind of a subset of the work that I do. The overall work that I do is about personal transformation and contact with true nature. And it's a way of working with the personality in which we go into the personality structure itself instead of trying to transcend it, which is the more traditional approach to spiritual work. We go into it, we work with it, we inquire, and what we find is that the personality has a natural tendency to loosen up and relax such that we can get glimpses, increasingly larger glimpses, of who and what we truly are.